Grebbeberg, the seventh full-length album from Sammath, is definitely more of a return to a focus on melody for the band after a couple of extremely kind of brutal and violent records. And in some sense, it retains a lot of the very aggressive militaristic blasting. And again, I've always been impressed with Wim Vanderwilk's drumming. So his addition to these compositions and movements are very inspired and of my own taste. And basically, if you're not familiar with the band, uh, the way a lot of people see this group is important for defining what was different about Netherlands black metal back in the day, in some respect, in terms of lending uh, something that wasn't so plainly inspired by Norwegian black metal. And I guess I would say that a lot of that was Jan Krutwagen's interest in Australian uh, heavy metal, thrash, and all that at the time. And I think that inspired a little bit of the more berserk feeling of some of their more blasted out sections. And I think there were programmed drums early on, but Stridged or Streak, however you pronounce the name of the first album, it was a pretty interesting record because you could hear a lot of the more brutal, almost war metallic sounds that would later feed into the band sound. But there was also keyboards and melody and some of his more idealized guitar work back then. So over the years, the sound of the band changed, and not in such a brutally direct way, but certainly the records did get more brutal over time. And my favorite is probably Dodengang, but as we hit like Godless Arrogance and more recently Across the Rhine is Only Death, we get the military themes being very pronounced, the World War II and World War One era, as well as more of a war metallic aggressive sound that still incorporates a little bit of melody and, in this case, a little bit more of an epic feeling. It's not like this is an immortal record through and through, but there is some sense that a little bit of early immortal touches some of what their intent is in terms of the brutality of it, as well as the frantic and austere melody. And really, the success of the guitar work on this record is that pointed melodicism, those sort of simple but effective melodic touches, which help to emphasize this theme, which is very much centered around a relative and their involvement in the Battle of the Netherlands. And I could kind of go on about this because I like researching this kind of thing, and it's pretty interesting. But let's get into a song first. So, if you're not familiar with the Battle of the Netherlands, and specifically the offensive that takes place in Grebbeberg, uh, um, basically it was a defensive act where Germany was aggressing upon pretty much how can I put it, the people who were defending the Netherlands at the time weren't prepared because after World War One, they all their guns had been taken away. It was a demilitarization effort by the government. Instead of going fully neutral in an effort to defend themselves, they forced everyone to go to war and defend. And what this meant was a lot of unprepared young folks who weren't trained or were recently trained and didn't have enough guns. Uh, their forces didn't equal the Germans. The Germans were inept. And one of the main reasons they kind of won and occupied the Netherlands for the next 5 years was because they uh, did some fucked up things. So read about that. I think it's really interesting. If you're the dirty plays that went into this theater of war there are kind of interesting in terms of just a tragedy that sort of led through there. So otherwise, that has a real effect on the family of Krutwagen, who had their a relative pass away in this offensive. So that it adds a little bit of weight to the themes here, and it adds a little bit of more interest. It's more specific and it's more personal in some ways. And I think that lends to sort of the impact of the record overall, and as well as there's sort of both a, a literary narrative achieved here, which is conveyed in the music. It's music that plays well with warfare, but also the tragedy of it and the impact of it. So it's something that uh, worked well for me. It's a band I had already enjoyed, and I feel like this is a nice next step where they've focused in on a meaningful melody, but still the simple uh, black metal style that comes from someone who remembers the emergence of extreme metal. So, if you're a fan of like Mine and Werfer, uh, or like certain eras of Marduk, that those are kind of easy ins if you just don't know what this is. But this probably has a little bit more of a buttoned up feeling in some ways and a more chaotic feeling in others. So, really, the focus is on songwriting and conveying a scene. And I feel like there's been a lot of work put into these lyrics to tell this story in an effective way. So, it just felt like they stepped it up in every way. They really thought about how to present this story, and I feel like there's a lot of enthusiasm behind it. These aren't throwaway tracks. These aren't rushed out pieces, but you still get the feeling of aggression in person. There's a sort of a little bit of, there's still a lot of an organic feeling to everything that Sammath does. So yeah, a high recommendation for me. Um, in general, I would say it is, I think, one of the better records from this band, but they've been pretty consistent. It's just how do you, like, where do you land in terms of fidelity? So this is probably one of their sharper records in terms of production and just the proper imbalance that black metal needs to be effective. So pretty solid record, high recommendation. You can read a lot more of my thoughts, probably more coherent on the actual review, and check it out today.